Alright, I am going to be ranking every Grand Theft Auto game, with the exception of GTA Online. That one I'm going to be cutting from here, because that's its own can of worms. Every single one, from the PS1 titles that no one knows about, to the Stories games, to even Advanced. Bet most of y'all didn't even know there was a GBA Grand Theft Auto game. But yeah, it exists. We're going to be starting off with the first one, obviously. Now, I actually owned this one as a little kid in the mid-2000s on a hand-me-down PS1 because I never got a PS2, unfortunately. And yes, my parents were based and red-pilled enough to let me play it. And I have to say, even back then, because I had already played, like, San Andreas and Vice City at that point, I could tell that this game was crap. I hate saying this, but it did not make the best first impression as a series. It is very awkward to come back and play this game. Everything about it, almost everything about it, is just not good. I mean, the gameplay is very clunky. You die in one hit without armor, which is just so stupid. The camera is very disorienting and causes you to have a headache. Even the open worlds, which there are 3 of them, are largely disinteresting. The only one I like is San Andreas, which is an inaccurate version of San Francisco with way too many palm trees, but it's very colorful, and there's a lot of diversity in the districts. It's the only map in the game that really holds up. And the story barely even exists at all. I mean, it is the first game in the series, so you have to cut it some slack, and it was on limited hardware. They're trying to do the best they can on a PS1, but man, it is just not fun to play. And the only thing about it that I can say actually is good is the soundtrack. Every genre of 1997 was represented here, and there's just a lot of diversity to it, and every song is fantastic. But other than that, man, like, this game's bad. I hate saying it. It's bad. And it's one of the reasons why the early Grand Theft Auto games on the PS1 are not remembered at all. With all that being said, even though I will say that this game is kind of bad, it's something that I think everyone should try playing just to see where this series started and how far it has come. Now, GTA London is pretty much more of the same, except it's set in the late 1960s. So you have cars from the late 60s, guns from the late 60s, a, Cockney British kind of aesthetic to it, and it is set in a real-life city, London, which is very unique for the series. Like, the series is known for making parodies of real-life cities and always American cities, but this one is set in a real-life British city. It really is just more of the same. The gameplay has not evolved any. It's literally the same gameplay from GTA 1, so it's very clunky, you die easily, it's difficult to navigate. Really, if you wanted more GTA 1, but slightly better than this is, I guess, kind of worth playing, but really isn't that much of an improvement. And apparently we got 1961 down here. I almost forgot about that. That's more of the same. I've not played it, but you know what? It's more of the same, except it's a lot more difficult from what I hear. In fact, it might be one of the hardest GTA games of all time because the time limits and the missions are very, very, strict. Speaking of black sheep in the franchise, we have GTA 2, which I'm going to put in math. This is the weirdest game in the series. The whole vibe and aesthetic is different than any other game in the series. It has a retro-futuristic cyberpunk aesthetic, with many of the cars being from the 1940s. You have a lot of cartoony kind of humor, which is very different from the series. And you even have stuff like a stun gun that turns, characters into skeletons. It is just so weird. But to me, the weirdest thing about this series is the PlayStation 1 version, which is got to be the most censored, watered down, and just safe version of GTA out there. For one, it has a T rating, so that means a lot less swearing, barely any blood. Even the soundtrack has, like, censorship in it, so you'll have, like, car horns blaring over swear words. And it's just weird. It kind of reminds me a bit of the Saints Row reboot and how censored that one was. Not nearly as bad, though, because this one still got, a Y2K edge to it. Still got some edgy humor, even in the watered-down PS1 version. But imagine if they tried to make a T-rated GTA nowadays. That shit would bomb so hard, it would cause riots in every major city on Earth, and it would start World War V. So, this is just so weird, and something that could only happen in the very, very early days of GTA before it became mainstream. But it doesn't really make much sense either, even still, because the first GTA game was very violent, had an M rating, had a lot of swearing in it. I don't know why they did this, other than maybe the moral guardians were trying to shut them up. But, with the exception of it being the most PC version of GTA out there, I mean, it makes so many quality of life choices, improvements from Grand Theft Auto 1. You have, a health bar. You have a respect system with various gangs. So depending on your actions, you will lose or gain respect with different gangs, multiple different paths. It looks better. And I have to admit, even though it does not feel like a GTA game, I actually do kind of like the vibe to this game. It still lacks certain things. I mean, it's still a top-down game, and there's no radar, so navigating the cities in this game is hard. It's even harder than GTA 1, because at least the maps in those games were very simple. It was clear and cut where you needed to go, whereas this one tries to add more verticality to it. The map layouts are more complex, and that's one of the things that kills it for me, and kills it for most of these old games, is the difficulty of navigation. But overall, this game is actually very solid, and I would recommend you play it. I'm only putting it in meh because, I mean, for the standards of the GTA series, it's just too unusual, too different, and if you're playing it on PS1, too censored for my liking. Now, GTA 3. This is kind of a hard one to rate, because I was pooping in diapers when this game came out, and my first GTA game was Vice City a couple years later. So, I mean, I wasn't really alive back then to witness the just overnight change in the landscape that this game created, and how it really popularized crime sandboxes, and how revolutionary it was for the time. But I have to say, as someone who has played Vice City and San Andreas before playing this, and has played every other game in the series, this game does not hold up well, and it is aged kind of badly. The graphics have aged poorly, but again, it was a game from 2001, so it's not going to really look that great by today's standards. I can forgive that. But the gameplay still got so much clunk. You cannot control the camera while walking. It remains static. The only way to control the camera is by going into the first-person mode, in which case you can only just stand around and look up and down. The story is still kind of shallow. I mean, your main character still doesn't speak or anything. You just do this thing for this boss. You betray that gang and then work for another gang and then do this thing for that boss. Rinse and repeat. There's just a lot of very frustrating things, like the cars being super brittle. At various points in the story, you will, piss off these gangs by betraying them or whatnot. And that part of the map where, that gang territory will become a complete no-go zone. You go into there, then they'll shoot up your car with shotguns and blow you up in 3 seconds, making it pretty much impossible to go into certain districts by a certain point in the game. And that to me has got to be the worst thing about it. An open world game where you can't go into certain places after a certain point. You just get shot up. Even in GTA 2, you could win back the respect of these gangs. And, in comparison, GTA 3 is much more linear in its, story and its progression, which is just kind of crazy to me to think that it could be a step down from GTA 2. The soundtrack is also not that great, and quite, weirdly lacks a rock station. This is, a few years before the Poptimus New World Order of 2008, and even GTA 5 had multiple rock stations, including an often overlooked modern rock station. This one doesn't have any rock in it. It's so strange for, being released in a time period where we still had, mainstream rock as a thing. I mean, the best you'll get is, Flashback FM, which features songs from the Scarface soundtrack. Overall, this game is one of the textbook definitions of a game that is aged poorly. Even if it is very influential, almost every game that takes influence from it is improving on the formula. This is just the, early blueprint for 3D open-world crime games, and if I had to say there was one game in the trilogy, the PS2 trilogy, that you could skip, this one. It's one I have the least motivation to play. But, moving on to Vice City, and talk about an improvement. This is going to be our first ever masterpiece. They finally made a game that withstands the test of time. They finally made a game that isn't crap. Took them a while, but they finally got here. And this is the first one I played when I was way too young to be playing it, by the way. This is mid-2000s, but everything about this game, I love. I love the story. I love the 1980s setting. I love the vibes and aesthetic, and I absolutely love the soundtrack. This is the game that not only got me into 80s music in general, but it specifically got me into 80s heavy metal music, and is one of the games that turned me into a metalhead in general with the V-Rock station. Just perfect station. I love that. There were so many quality of life, improvements from 3 that pretty much made 3 obsolete the second this game dropped. You had a speaking main character, you had a more deep plot, better story with better acting, you had purchasable properties, more weapons, more cars, you could finally fly a helicopter and actually fly proper planes. It was just so good. I mean, there still is some clunk here and there. I mean, the controls are a marginal improvement over the ones in GTA 3, and Tommy Vercetti couldn't swim. A game set in Florida where you can't swim. Yeah. Kind of a dumb decision, and the most infamous, flaw of this game, but it doesn't break it. Overall, this is an experience that... Overall, this game is something you have to experience. It's one of the best open-world crime games of the 2000s, and something I will cherish forever. San Andreas, another masterpiece. I mean, what needs to be said? Pretty much everything about it is perfect, and it is the ultimate refinement of the template they started with 3. They took what they had with 3, what they had with Vice City, and they perfected it. The controls were now perfect, smooth as butter. The game world was even bigger, featuring 3 cities. The story was the biggest one yet, and it goes into so many different places with so many different characters, and they're just all fantastic. You had the most diverse soundtrack up to that point. This game is heaven on a disc. And it really pushed the PS2 to its limits. Sure, the graphics by today's standards didn't look that good. Even at the time, I have to say, the graphics were more polygonal than you would expect from a mid-2000s PS2 game. And there were a lot of games coming out at this point that already were starting to lean towards 7th gen, Half-Life 2 being one of them. But, you know, when you take into consideration the massive open world and just visual aesthetic that they managed to cram in there despite the limitations, I mean, this game just blew us all away when it came out. It was just so impressive. Like, how could this get any better? And in a way, I feel like very few games have really topped this. The only game that I think has truly topped San Andreas at its own game is Saints Row 2. And even that one's, you know, kind of, you know, taken down a bit by a small map. This game still, to this day, feels massive. And it was just so fun to mess around with because you had more weapons, more cars, more cheats than ever. This game never gets boring. It is just so fun to play. And it is arguably the best in the series. But on the same day that GTA San Andreas released, we also got Grand Theft Auto Advanced on the Game Boy Advance. And it is one of the worst GTA games of all time. I have played it before on an emulator, and I have to say, even on an emulator, this game lags so badly. It really is just one of the most superfluous GTA games of all time. The story is so fucking boring, like, I can't remember anything about it. It goes back to that GTA 1 style. I mean, there's just nothing to say about this game. It's just a bland, mediocre, handheld game. The only thing that this game had going for it at the time was it was on a portable console. It wasn't the first one, a GTA game to be released on a portable console. I mean, GTA 1 and 2 were released on Game Boy Color, and those, if I had to put a tier below bad, I would put those in that tier, because those are the worst GTA games of all time. But GTA Advance really has nothing going for it. It's a complete nothing burger of a game, and it's rightfully forgotten. Moving on to Liberty City Stories. This is another portable title, and I have to say this is actually a pretty good game when you consider the system it was initially released on, the PSP back in 2005. And it actually has a somewhat decent story to it, and, you know, has some San Andreas influenced gameplay design. So it's like a mixture of San Andreas in GTA 3. And I have to say, even though it's not particularly remarkable and a lot of people sleep on it, I think this is actually, you know, a pretty decent game in the series. I love the vibe. I love the Y2K setting. I don't like the soundtrack, though. This is one of the weakest soundtracks in the series. And again, no rock station, even though it's set in 1998 when nu metal was starting to become mainstream. They just didn't want to license, you know, a soundtrack. Again, it does the same thing that, you know, a lot of early GTA games do, where they just create in-house parody pop music, and they couldn't even, like, create a parody of nu metal. I guess because it was 2005 and nu metal was still somewhat mainstream at that point, so it's kind of redundant. A lot of elements of the 90s carried on pretty well into the 2000s, up until, like, about 2006, so it would have been redundant to make a parody of that, but it's a good game. Vice City Stories is a great game, though, and this takes everything that, you know, Liberty City Stories did and just improved on it. And it's actually one of the best GTA games of all time. You know, it's got a more down-to-earth story than Vice City. You know, it's doesn't seem to really be taking as much influence from Miami Vice and Scarface as that one. You know, you have a character that's brought into crime because he got kicked out of the military, which is a lot more realistic and down to earth. So they were kind of experimenting with a more down-to-earth story, but in a, you know, vibrant 80s setting. And the gameplay, if you think that Vice City was a bit clunky, this is like Vice City, but without the clunky gameplay. It also has the second best soundtrack in the series, which is much the same as Vice City. I mean, it's got most of the same stations, and it's pretty much of the same quality, and V-Rock makes a return with some more awesome kick-ass 80s metal. So, there's another game that radicalized me into being a metalhead. 4. Now, when this came out, I remember there were quite a few people that were disappointed in its wake. I mean, this game scales back some of the gameplay and like map design from San Andreas, and it was a lot less wacky. It was more down to earth and realistic. And at the time, if you liked the customization options of San Andreas, if you liked that massive open world and all that complexity, you were probably going to be disappointed by it, because it was much more scaled back. You really couldn't customize your character that much. The story was very down-to-earth and realistic. The gameplay was realistic. There were less weapons, there were less cars, there was no fighter jets or anything like that. But with the benefit of hindsight, and the only other GTA game to come out afterwards being a little bit of a disappointment, oh, foreshadowing, this game is another masterpiece in the series, and I have to say, I really love it. And the thing I love about it the most is just the complex gameplay design and the physics and the atmosphere and how real it feels. No other game in the series feels as lived in and realistic as this one. It may not have the graphics of the next major full-blown title that's coming up, but it has that life that you just don't see in games anymore. This game came out in April of 2008, and its ragdoll physics and its car damage model and like it's all of its little details blows modern gaming out of the water. It's crazy to think that this may have been the very peak of gaming, and gaming went downhill afterwards, because it's like games that came afterwards could not get those little details down. The ragdoll physics in a lot of modern games look like ass. You know, the NPCs are literally NPCs. They don't act like real people. The worlds just feel fake and shallow. And this game, all those years ago, can feel so realistic, but modern games can't. It's just unbelievable. And the story to it is just fantastic. It's a lot more down-to-earth than previous games in the series, but I think that was for the better, and it was, you know, kind of an experiment worth having, and it really shows a lot of maturity. But moving on to the DLCs, Lost and Damned is considered the worst of the two DLCs for 4, and I mean, I'm gonna say it's, you know, it's great. Great or good, I don't know. I mean, it's good, but I mean, it's more or less just biker-themed GTA 4, and doesn't really add too much to the game. I mean, the story's pretty good. I like the biker aesthetic, but it just doesn't add enough to it to really change the formula, like Ballad of Gay Tony. And the Ballad of Gay Tony, I'm almost tempted to put this above 4. I think that this is fantastic. It's like a wacky GTA 4. Like if the aesthetic from Vice City was plastered into a GTA 4, and you had all that like fun content in terms of like weapons and tanks and helicopters, you get the Ballad of Gay Tony. And I have to admit, I typically play this over both 4 and The Lost and Damned. It's my favorite of the GTA 4 era games. I'm almost forgetting about Chinatown Wars. This game is so underrated, it is unbelievable. People sleep on this game way too much. And it's because it had the misfortune of coming out on the Nintendo DS, which had a completely different target audience than the Xbox 360 and PS3. And so, when it initially released, this game flopped hard. And only weirdos like me bought it. And it's a shame, because it is such a good game, you know? It's like if you took the first couple of GTA games and made them good and actually refined them and added, you know, all sorts of different stuff. Chinatown Wars, to me, feels like what the original first couple of GTA games, top-down ones, should have been and could have been, considering that this was made on a DS, and the DS is, hardware-wise, very similar to a PS1. But it just has so many, like, modern GTA things to it. You know, you had the side stories, the vigilante, you had the best side activity of them all, the drug dealing minigame, which was super addicting, and I spent hours just, you know, slinging drugs in the game, not in real life. Don't do drugs, kids. And the story was actually pretty decent as well, too. It's just a very fun game that you could take with you on the go, and the PSP version was even better, had more missions, and had a better soundtrack, too. Even had a metal station, which is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually one of my favorite GTA games, and I will die on that hill. But moving on to the big one, the biggest one of them all, and the most recent one. Cannot believe it has been 12 years since this game came out. GTA 5. When GTA 5 first, you know, came out, I loved it. Everybody loved it. We'd been waiting for it for 2 years. And we had just had so much hype building up to this that it kind of, you know, brainwashed us into accepting it as better than it actually is for many years, myself included. I did not want to admit that this game could possibly have been a letdown or been overhyped. But with the benefit of hindsight, I have to say that this is one of the most mid games of, you know, mid-mainstream games of all time. The first time you play this, it is super exciting, you know, it's balls to the wall, it's like a Michael Bay action flick. But then you go back and play it a second time, and you find yourself getting bored with it. You find the missions linear and boring, you find the characters to be obnoxious, and even the satire, the thing that I've liked about these games from day one, starts to go downhill and really just devolves into Vivzy pop writing. I mean, there's just so many sex jokes. Even in the story, there's these unfunny scenes where you'll have Chop having sex with another dog or Trevor taking a dump. Just very unfunny stuff like that. And you just also have the fact that the open world was a lot more shallow than previous games, with very few interiors, not a lot of cool side activities. The physics were worse. You know, the NPCs were far worse. You just stand right next to them, and they start fighting you for no reason, instead of, you know, acting like actual humans like they did in GTA 4. All that, combined with the fact that this game has been re-released like Skyrim, and the fact that it is the best-selling game in the series by a long shot. I mean, I'm just gonna have to put it in good tier, maybe? I don't hate this game, I think it's fine, but for a GTA game with that level of hype, it does not live up to it at all, really. We were hyped up like it was the second coming of Jesus Christ, but it ain't anywhere near that. And going back to it many years later, I have more nostalgia for that period of hype in between 2011 and September 2013 than I do the actual game. Because the hype felt so good, we thought it was just going to be the best thing since sliced bread. But years later, this game just does nothing for me. I don't like the characters. I don't even really like the soundtrack that much. I don't like the map. There's just so many things about it that I personally do not like. And worse yet is that it gave us GTA Online, which is the final nail in the coffin for the GTA series until 2026, when hopefully GTA 6 will be, a good game. At least be better than 5. But 5 taught me not to overhype games, to, be wary of hype. With unrealistic levels of hype, you're gonna end up being disappointed by a game. Should I talk about the trilogy? Should I really talk about the trilogy? Well, you know what? I am going to talk about it. I don't know how anybody ever thought this was going to be a good thing. I mean, as soon as the trailer dropped, it looked like something out of a Robot Chicken sketch. The graphics were ass. The bad kind. I don't know how anyone could have ever been hyped when the game looked so bad and they were just proudly displaying this ugly garbage to us. I'm almost convinced they were putting subliminal messages into the trailers to convince us that the game actually looked good. And I even remember some journos saying that it was that the art style was faithful to the 2D art in the loading screens or some crap like that. Some ideas are so stupid only a professional journalist could believe them. And then the game actually released. And it was the drizzling shit. It was terrible. I mean, And the funny thing is, I didn't even really come to the conclusion how bad it was until a couple days later, because I was smoking pot at that point, and it wasn't in my right mind. But, man, this is one of the worst things of all time. Especially on release, where it was just glitchy, buggy, unplayable, and looked like an absolute eyesore. It has gotten improved in passing years, but it's still the worst way to play the original trilogy by far, and it's such a shame that they decided to take the originals off of the storefronts and replace it with this. With shit like that, it's so hard to trust Rockstar Games anymore, and it's why I'm still a little bit skeptical of GTA 6. But yeah, that's got to be the one of the worst ones by far. But yeah, this is my ranking. If I had to make any last minute changes, I might actually put Lost and Damned in great, because if I had a choice between GTA 5 and GTA Lost and Damned, well, I'd prefer the game where Johnny doesn't get his head smashed in by some fucking meth head. Oh god, it's another thing about GTA 5 that's so disrespectful. But there's my ranking of every single game, minus online. I'm not going to rank that one. So hopefully you enjoyed this second tier list video of mine.